Tigist Assefa of Ethiopia just broke the world record for the women's fastest marathon ever wearing these, the Adizero Adios Pro Evo 1 by Adidas. Of course, an incredible achievement, so why is it the shoes that are making the headlines? Well, because, get this, they are single use. These shoes are so light, only 138 grams, that they are only designed to last for the length of one race, after which time they will essentially fall apart. These shoes will now be on sale for the general public at an eye-watering price of $500 a pair, with that built-in shelf life of just a few dozen miles. The marketing slogan might as well be planned obsolescence and proud, because these are literally designed to go to waste. Included with every pair of the Adizero Pro Evo 1 is a little disclaimer card that even says that the shoes are only meant to be used for one familiarization period as well as one marathon. So does this mean that we're all going to start using single-use shoes for running? And what do moves like this mean for brands like Adidas in terms of their sustainability goals and commitments? Is Adidas a fast fashion brand? Let's dive into the details. So a bit more about this revolutionary running shoe. Adidas are saying that this is a shoe enhanced with unique technology that challenges the boundaries of racing, and it's a landmark marriage between cutting-edge technology and athletics in the world of sport. The marathon record did get absolutely smashed, shaving over 2 whole minutes off the previous world record. Of course, not all of this can be put down to the shoe. The athlete was also heavily involved, but the design is such that they've created this special rocker at the front of the shoe that propels the athlete forward. And as I mentioned earlier, it's also super light material. There's a lot of innovation and a lot of science and technology involved in the crafting of this particular shoe. From a performance perspective, the shoe really is incredible. But my question is, how many people in the world really need this particular product? Like, how many people out of the 8 billion on the planet can say that they need this product in their lives? So I was curious as to why Adidas was selling this for the global market of normal consumers, people who are into running as a hobby, or people who even wear Adidas but don't do any sport. And luckily it turns out that yes, it is for general sale, but they are only creating 1,000 pairs in a really limited, super exclusive release. This particular review says, clearly this is a shoe meant for the feet of Adidas elites and nobody else. The only reason it's seeing a release whatsoever is because Adidas needs to comply with the World Athletics ruling before full marathon season. There's really no need for this shoe in the general marketplace. So it doesn't look like we're moving to single use being the norm for runners anytime soon. Well, that's my job done. See you in the next one. Bye. Just kidding, we have a lot more to talk about. It's a massively innovative product, which is great, but that led me on to my next question, which is, was it worth investing so much time and energy and resources and money into creating just 1,000 pairs of these shoes that are, bear in mind, designed to go to waste? What else could they have spent that money on that might have had better outcomes for humanity? That review I just mentioned also says it's almost guaranteed that even at a price tag of $500, they're still losing money on it because of the amount that they've invested into creating the design in the first place. And that leads on to the wider question, which is, what's more important, innovation or sustainability? The challenge of balancing performance with sustainability seems to be the biggest challenge facing specifically the activewear pocket of the fashion industry. Because activewear has a lot more nuances to it, right? It has to be sweat wicking, it has to be breathable, it has to be designed for the particular activity that you're doing, it has to fit perfectly and not slide down and not slide around. So there's a lot more details that need to be considered, and to do that sustainably, especially without using plastic, is quite difficult. So balancing the ambition to empower and enable people to run faster and jump higher using these bouncy sweat wicking materials with at the same time using materials that are natural, that don't harm the environment, and that have some kind of purpose to them at the end of their life where they're being recycled and remade and mended or passed on. Balancing those two things is not easy, especially when brands like Nike and Adidas are constantly competing with each other to create the best performing shoes over the most sustainable ones. And even more so because the performance aspect really comes with these synthetic materials like polyester and nylon, which are made from fossil fuels, so oil. A lot of these brands are starting to use recycled polyester and recycled nylon, which is great because it saves a lot of energy. However, there's still the end of life solution to think of. So if that product ends up in landfill, it's going to take hundreds of years for it to break down. And whilst it's being used, if it's being washed, the microfibers that are released from those products will also end up in our oceans. So recycled polyester and recycled nylon is definitely not the perfect solution for the activewear industry. And even what is being claimed to be the first carbon neutral shoe created by Allbirds and announced a little bit earlier in this year, you can check out this other video next for more details on that. Even that had to include some synthetic materials in the upper for durability and stretch. That's not to say that some steps haven't been taken. There's been little pockets of innovation. So when Nike released their Space Hippie range, for example, using recycled materials, or Allbirds when they started using this regenerative wool, which actually sequesters more CO2 than it takes to create the end product, making their products actually carbon negative. But the real problem is scale, because these are all just little pockets, little bits of innovation. And often when it comes from these really big brands like Nike and Space Hippie, for example, they're just gimmicks, which kind of just feeds into greenwashing tactics. Until Nike and Adidas are making all of their products with more sustainable materials, using more sustainable packaging, and scaling that to a place where they are really considering the entire life cycle of the product and taking responsibility for it at the end of its life as well as part of a circular economy, until we get to that point, we haven't really made that much progress. And that really leads me to question how dedicated these brands are to their sustainability commitments when all they seem to really be focused on is producing the next best thing, regardless of how sustainable it may be. They just want to be the first one to come out with this really shiny, new, impressive thing. Maybe it's human nature to always be striving for the next bigger and better thing, but if we apply that attitude of infinite growth to a planet with finite resources, we end up in a climate collapse because we just don't have the capacity for it. We can't know what world records will be broken in 10 years' time, how much further we can push humanity in terms of sport and athletic performance, but what we do know is that we really can't push our climate much further at all. Like, we know those limits. They have been set, they have been studied. We know the science. Fashion accounts for 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions. We need to massively revolutionize the way that we make stuff, and we need to do it now. Adidas's VP for Product, Running and Credibility Sports says that the shoe embodied the brand's mission to continuously challenge the status quo. But that's really only true on the performance side of things, isn't it? Because when it comes to challenging the status quo of the fashion industry, which exploits people and the planet for profit, they're really not leading the charge by any means. Their sustainability page states that they are focusing on changing materials, wearing longer, reducing footprint, but I don't see how a single-use shoe is aligned with that mission. They take some limited steps to prevent deforestation by not using raw materials that are listed on the IUCN Red List of threatened species, and 96% of their polyester is now recycled. However, they don't have a clear policy on biodiversity, and they also have been charged in court for greenwashing because of how they were promoting their recycled products. So when they released their Stan Smith sneakers, they were claiming that they were 50% recycled when actually that only applied to the upper of the shoes. As for worker rights and ethics, Adidas has scored 50 out of 100 in the latest Fashion Transparency Index, which is granted above a lot of the other brands, but is really still not good enough. It's not good enough in terms of telling customers exactly who's making their clothes, where they're being made, what conditions they're being made in, and what impacts those choices are having on the environment. It does have its own social audit program, but it's faced a lot of scrutiny recently with the arrival of the foul play report, which highlighted the difference between the amount that they pay their athletes like Lionel Messi for sponsorship deals versus the amount that they pay their workers, since there's no evidence that Adidas guarantees a living wage for most of its supply chain. The Clean Clothes campaign has also revealed that Adidas owes over 30,000 Cambodian garment workers over $11 million in in wages from way back in 2021, whilst the brand's revenue grew by 15% in that year. Hashtag pay your workers. The Clean Clothes campaign has gone even further this year to protest Adidas by releasing a fake PR campaign claiming that an ex-garment worker had become CEO of Adidas, pushing them to admit that they don't actually protect their workers' rights. Iconic. If you want to get involved in the action asking Adidas to pay their workers what they're due, then head to the link in the description where you can write to Adidas and ask them to take full responsibility for their supply chain and everyone in it. So overall, the brand rating app Good On You has rated Adidas just a 3 out of 5, which is it's a start. Most of the brands that I've talked about so far on this channel have received very similar scores, and they have all been fast fashion. So the natural question is, does Adidas count as fast fashion? Or is it something else? In my video about Nike, I labeled Nike sort of a fast fashion brand for athletes, and I think that that applies pretty well to Adidas as well. In case you're not familiar with the model of fast fashion, this exploits people and the planet by taking resources out of our environment, turning it into clothes that are usually really cheap quality, that get thrown away, end up in landfill, and 99% of fast fashion clothing is sent to landfill or incinerated overall. So it's a massive waste and overconsumption and overproduction crisis. Usually there's also a real lack of transparency in fast fashion brands about their supply chain. Now, Adidas is not Shein, which is the brand that is currently at the peak of fast fashion, but there are definitely some similarities. Where brands like Shein produce in immense volumes, thriving online, targeting mostly young women through platforms like TikTok and influencer campaigns, Adidas and Nike aim at a wider market of ages and genders using pro athletes as their spokespeople. Their customers are serious about wearing quality stuff and will pay more for it, while Shein is famously poor quality and appeals to a low price point. Adidas is much more established and respected as a brand, partly because it's been around for so long. It's one of the most recognizable logos in the world, and their marketing team know exactly what they're doing. They're aiming for these world famous, lasting campaigns. But they're still churning out massive amounts of stock, contributing to overproduction and encouraging overconsumption. They're also not taking full responsibility for the entire life cycle of their products, which means that they're not recovering their products, they're not using a circular supply chain to recover that material and remake it. It's just being sent to landfill, whilst they are also underpaying their workers. These are things that Shein are also experts at. So the underlying business model seems to be basically the same. There's just an upper layer of more refined branding, a bit more maturity, the brand's a bit more grown up, especially because it invests a lot of its profits into this kind of innovative, tech-led thing, which also makes it seem more grown up and mature as a brand. And I think that might also be why it appeals a bit more to a male audience as well. Whereas brands like Shein are very much so focused on that female audience. So should you avoid buying from Adidas? Probably, if you can. Luckily, because it's such a massive brand, you can find a lot of their pieces on secondhand sites like Depop or Vinted or eBay, and you can find the styles that they're looking for whilst not contributing to the profits of the company and also keeping that material and those products in circulation and in use even after someone else doesn't want them, which is really great. And you can also check out some of these great ethical and sustainable alternatives, which I will also link in the description if you want to check out some really cool, sporty, sustainable brands. So how do you feel about the idea of a single-use running shoe? Do you think it's really cool that we're able to create things like this which really propel humans further and allow us to fulfill our full potential? Or do you feel like Adidas should be investing that money into actual real sustainable solutions within their business rather than just claiming that they care about sustainability and then going off and making things that are designed to literally become waste? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and also let me know what brand I should review next. Until next time, stay kind and I'll see you later. Bye!